Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third part in our five-part series, Your Data, Your Way. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for a couple more people to show up, and then we'll launch in. All right, let's get started. So this is the part 3 in our webinar series, Your Data, Your Way, where we're going to be talking about data cleansing, particularly how to manually update, replay data en masse. Our next webinar is going to be more about how you do that automatically. So hi, my name is Tim Liu from Hull. I'm here, head of product here. I've been doing data my whole career, and I'll tell you right now that data cleansing is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Obviously, data companies out there are talking about the value you get, the insights. You can't manage what you can't measure, and things like the technology, how it's really cool and what we can use it for. But data cleansing is something that very few companies talk about. I found this on Reddit earlier, and this is actually a statistic that's been going around for a while about how 80% of a data scientist's time is spent cleaning. And it's known by a few different terms: data wrangling, data munging, data prep. Sometimes I feel like a data janitor. I've heard data plumber. There's all kinds of different titles I've assigned myself over time. I think the key here is that even if it's somewhere close to 80%, we don't want to be spending that much time ideally on data cleaning, but a lot of the time it's just the realities of the data sets that we've been given. And I'd like to believe that I've actually been on both sides of the data cleaning efforts, where certainly you have very advanced algorithms that are trying to figure out and determine with some level of confidence how clean or dirty your data is. And then on the other side, when you've got a team of people that's looking on Google Earth trying to figure out if an address is a real address or not. So I think there's a variety of levels of data cleansing that we can talk about. We're going to hone in on a couple today that specifically have to do with sales and marketing, and a couple different manual ways that you can use Hull to update your data, to find and update your data. So what I'm going to start with is a quick introduction to Hull. What does Hull do? What are we introducing in this webinar series? What does bad data mean in this context? What are some different scenarios that we see? I'll talk about the difference between programmatic cleaning and manual cleaning and when to use either approach. And then we're going to really dive into the details, and I'm going to show you a bunch of different scenarios where you can update a bunch of data and fan it out to your systems. You can detect duplicates and fan it back to the people who know how to merge. And hopefully you'll get a good sense for the types of things that you can do. One of our demos is actually going to be using Microsoft Excel, which I'm excited every time I get to do a VLOOKUP, because most of my time is spent in the database world. So every time I get a VLOOKUP working, it feels like magic. But certainly all of this can be done with Elasticsearch queries or SQL queries on top of your data warehouse as well. So Hull is a customer data platform which allows you to bring in all of your sources, create unified profiles and unified attributes, and then fan those back out into your systems. In particular, fanning it out in such a way so that you can create more personalized experiences for your prospects. We are going to be focusing this time on the cleansing and then transforming piece of what Hull does. So on LinkedIn for the past maybe year or two, I've been seeing lots of posts about how people are really scared when they're sending out an email template, not sure if the data's all there all the time. And then of course there's the group of people who are making fun of the people that are sending out hello null. I think it's kind of fueling itself. But no doubt across all verticals, there always comes a point where you kind of have to have the courage to send out your data. I'm totally understand where everybody's coming from. So I think the key here is not only knowing your data better, putting the governance in place that'll help you find bad data and keep it away from the good data, but also finding ways to update that data, standardize it, remediate it, and get it back to the place where you can use it. I think it's sort of interesting how people sometimes use the phrase garbage in, garbage out when you're talking about data. I don't really believe in that saying in this case because there's always some level at which you need to transform your data or standardize it to get it to the right place. Saying garbage in, garbage out sort of is getting around the problem and passing the buck to somebody else. In this webinar, we're not going to be talking about passing the buck. We're going to be talking about actually getting in there and fixing it. So, what are the different types of data situations that need to be cleaned in a sales and marketing context? So, incomplete profiles, I think, is certainly one of the things that we can talk about. If you're using enrichment providers, maybe they don't always return attributes in all cases. In account, same issue with accounts as well. Unstandardized data, I think everybody is used to job titles not being standardized, particularly when you're bringing in that data from a form submission. Duplicate data records, we're going to spend a whole little section on duplicate data records because I know that that's what everybody has issues with. And outdated information, certainly, if you're using an enrichment provider and you haven't enriched a person's profile in the last year, they could have changed jobs. And then, our world is in CRMs where SDRs are typing things in. There will always be some level of, human error and fat fingering that we'll need to deal with. So I'm going to do a quick quiz. What percent of marketing budgets do you think are wasted due to bad data? And this actually, we got a statistic from Forrester, which is, I think, a little bit more reputable than the 80% of data scientist job is cleaning. This one's kind of an interesting one. All right. Let's see. So it turns out the answer is 21% of your marketing budget is wasted as a result of bad data. I think it certainly depends on the marketing program and what you're doing, but I think even this as a directional statistic is telling about how much money we're spending on marketing and how much is going to waste as a result of bad data, especially as we become more data driven in our campaigns. Certainly in an ideal world, data cleaning would be a 100% automated task. I talked to a few people over the past 6 months that actually have pretty interesting products where they think machine learning can actually come into play and help you clean your data. I hope and pray that it does and that this isn't a problem anymore. But for what I've seen, at the end of the day, it comes back to knowing your data better, figuring out how to clean it en masse, and then figuring out some sort of governance program that can automatically help you standardize and clean your data, and then find when it isn't standardized and cleaned. So there's two methods that we're going to talk about for cleaning data, and I think it's less about two methods and more of a stepped approach. So what I always recommend, especially when you've got data that you're worried about it not being standardized or correct, is bringing all your data into one place and beginning to explore it, beginning to know your data a little bit better. I even saw somebody online arguing that it's actually a good thing that you're spending 80% of your time cleaning the data because then you get to know your data set a little bit better. I don't know if I'm fully on board with that, but I think there is a level at which spending time knowing what your data looks like, cleaning it up a little bit manually can really help inform when you need to break it down and actually put those rules into code and clean this stuff automatically, because obviously nobody wants to be in a position where you're constantly manually cleaning data. But I think there's always a point at which it's really nice to just have a button that says, you know what, I just want that fixed. You can click it and it's fixed. If I see it again, I'll figure out how to automate something and fix it. But if not, great. Maybe it was just like a one-time thing. And so part 4, our next webinar, is going to be talking a little bit more about how to take those rules and those things that you discover and put them into an automated framework in Hull. So we're going to be showing you a few different things. Certainly, we're going to be showing you how to find the bad data, update it. We're going to be showing you how to backfill historical data, especially if you've created new data points that are standardized. And then we're going to take a look at identifying duplicates and pushing them to the people that know how to deal with the duplicates. Okay, let's dive into the demo here. All right, so this is a data set I've been using for the past couple webinars. This is the whole segmentation UI. One of the nice things about the segmentation UI is that you're able to see all of the data points you have across all of your systems. So what I'm going to be doing is starting with a pretty typical case where we have unstandardized titles. So say, for example, I want to find everybody with a HubSpot job title, and I want to see what those values are. So that's pretty good. I've got a bunch of titles in HubSpot. Let's find job titles that I might have in Outreach. So HubSpot, if you're using it as your CRM, perhaps there's an SDR typing in the title. Outreach, maybe you're uploading lists. Got a couple more. And then let's look at titles I'm getting off Livestorm, probably submitted by the people themselves. All right. So here I can see titles across all of my systems. I can even see where there are gaps in my system as well. So maybe these people had never submitted a Livestorm form before. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say not where they have all of them, but where they have any one of them, and I actually be able to see more gaps as well. So here are all the people where I have titles across all of my systems. So say, for example, I want to start with standardizing the CEO value for a particular title. So what Hull does for you, that's pretty nice. Oh, actually, let me have to set this. What Hull does for you, that's pretty nice, is actually shows you all of the possible values based off of the data that you have for that particular attribute. So certainly we're going to select CEO, Chief Executive Officer, President and CEO, maybe not Captain, CEO lowercase. Okay, now we have a pretty good list, but we also have to segment based off of the outreach title as well and find ones that have just the CEO values. Chief in charge. Let's see anything else. Oh, yeah, president, chief executive. The autofill makes it pretty nice to find this stuff pretty quickly. And then Livestorm, chief exec. Buck stops here. I've seen all kinds of things submitted for titles over the years, especially when people are trying to be funny. All right. So now we've got a pretty good list of people who are the CEO. So one way to potentially start to standardize these is to set these fields one by one across all of the systems. One of the patterns we like to use at Hull is to separate the raw data from the standardized or unified data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually create a new attribute called standardized string. We're good. So I've already preloaded this new attribute. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these people. I'm going to say edit. I'm going to select standardized title, and I'm going to use my standardized value. Great. And then now I can go and see standardized title is CEO across the board. So that's great. We've got standardized data in Hull. That's what Hull is for. So now the next step is to actually fan this out into your different services so that you can enable your marketers and your salespeople to use this new standardized good data. So I'm going to take you over to our connector, for example, to HubSpot. And most of these CRM and marketing automation connectors look pretty similar. You're essentially choosing a certain attribute to sync and what value to sync it to. So in my case, I've created a new standardized title field. I want to sync it to the title field. Pretty straightforward. Save. Okay. And I'll go back. And now I want to backfill all of these people to make sure that they specifically have the CEO title. So I've got them selected. I can actually say user actions, send to HubSpot. Click send. And now all of those users will be recomputed and sent to HubSpot. And then I do the same for all of my other systems that I want to sync standardized title to. Nice thing about that is that I only have to do this once, and then in the future it will be syncing that attribute no matter what. So now that I have all of these attributes mapped, I can go through and do the other titles as well, and they will automatically be synced to that field. So I think one thing that I'll mention quickly is that I showed you how to send these users to the connectors, but ideally, what you might want to do is you might want anybody who has a standardized title automatically synced. So what I can do is I can create a segment where the standardized title exists, and then in my Salesforce and HubSpot connectors, I can set that segment. And now anytime a user enters this segment, basically anytime a user has a standardized title, we know to sync them out to HubSpot or Salesforce. It's a way of saying only sync the good data to my systems once I've standardized it. And actually using that pattern where a person enters into a segment, especially ones that are more complicated, is something that a lot of people really like to use Hull for, where you can drive really personalized outreach based off of the things people do and the attributes that they have. But that's a little bit of out of scope for this webinar. One additional piece that I'll talk about is we talked a little bit about sending users to services. You can do the exact same things when it comes to accounts. What you can also do with Hull is send customer behavior over to your connectors as well. So for example, Hull isn't the only system with a user timeline. There's Intercom out there, there's HubSpot, there's Salesforce tasks. A lot of the time you want to send some grouping of events in Hull to your connectors as well. And so what we can do is we can say any user with this behavior, and this is view to web page, for example, You can actually replay those events on those users, pick where they're going. For example, Salesforce, which if you have them mapped as tasks, will appear as tasks within Salesforce. You pick the particular event. It could be a task, Asana task created, any given event you can trigger off of. In this case, I'll say the page event. Maybe we don't want to send a page event to Salesforce, but we may want to send it to Customer IO, for example, so that you can see that they're looking at your website. You can choose a time range for the events to send. And we give you a lot of different parameters for being able to replay events, because events can be pretty voluminous if you type in the wrong thing. So this actually shows you how many events you're about to send to Customer IO. So I think to conclude this part of the demo, there's a lot of data that you have in Hull. All of it is, you're able to access all of it, and you're able to replay all of it to any given system. This functionality is really useful. For example, historical backfill, definitely. If you're migrating systems to a system that doesn't have any data, it's invaluable. There's a lot of different ways that you're able to mold this data and push it to your different systems depending on what you want in those different systems. All right. So this next part of the demo, I think, is talking a little bit more about duplicate management. So duplicate management is an issue across lots of different use cases. I think it's one of the first things I ask about when we're talking with customers. And there's a lot of different ways to handle it. Like I said before, you can do group by queries in your data warehouse. You can do Elasticsearch queries. I'm going to show you how to do it with a VLOOKUP. All right. So here, for example, are some contacts in HubSpot. We set up the demo a little bit so you can see the duplicates pretty clearly, but this could be, not just 6 users, this could be thousands, tens of thousands. So some group of users that you want to clean. And so the first thing you may want to do, if you want to start to know a little bit more about these users and you want to use some of your VLOOKUPs, or you're really good at Excel and you want to get some of this data in there, you can select these users and click export. Export as CSV and tell it what your email is. And it will export all of these columns and all of these users. So the next step is to load it up in Google Sheets. So here's all of our data, and here's a few of the data points. We see that we've got a little bit of duplication here. So what we're going to want to do is create a new column, a new attribute that flags the duplicates. And so I feel like every time I do this, I have to look up VLOOKUP syntax again. And so for this particular data set, I was able to find a slightly easier way to dedupe on a single column. VLOOKUP would be required if you were deduping across 2 columns. But if I have a single column, it turns out, and I didn't know this, you can actually use a COUNTIF on the column B. And if it's greater than 1, I say true. If it's less than 1, I say false. So that's great. I'm able to use my Excel skills to find interesting users. So the next part, to easily import it back into Hull, we're going to use the Hull applet. Did I just say applet? I guess maybe it isn't an applet. It's sort of an app within the Google spreadsheet interface. And so now we have this sort of sidebar here where first we're going to select our identity claims. So email could be one, external ID could be another. This is a way to identify in particular which users we're talking about. And then I'm going to, let's see, then I'm going to Then I'm going to map the Boolean field that I have, that I just made, this duplicate Boolean. I'm going to map it to this manual import field. And then what I can do is select all of these rows and hit import. And now we've imported our brand new flag into Hull. And so let's go check it out. So here are our users, and I had this pulled up before with this Boolean flag true. So now that we've flagged our duplicates, what do we want to do with them? Certainly, it could be just as easy as saying, I want to delete one or the other. A lot of the time when you're talking about duplicates, what I've found is that nobody really knows the truth except for the person who kind of typed it in or who's trying to prospect these people. Because, for example, all of the SDR's tasks may be on the first user, but all of the historical or enriched information may be on another user. So what we can do, just like with the other fields, is we can map them back to Salesforce or HubSpot as a flag, where then the SDRs can go in and determine which one is the better record. Or in Salesforce's case, even better, you have a merge tool where you can actually decide what field wins as you're merging them together. And so this is sort of a pretty powerful pattern, especially for people who know spreadsheets pretty well, where you can bring data in, write lots of different algorithms for detecting certain things and flagging them. As I said before, you could do this with a SQL database where you push stuff out, write a query, bring it back in, and then flag data as well. All right, so we talked a little bit about how data cleansing is sort of an inevitable thing that you have to deal with. Today, we showed you a few different manual ways that you can clean data en masse and different ways to flag and audit your data as you go along. Next webinar, we're going to be teaching about how you can take all of that information and actually put that into your code so that these processes are executed automatically as your data comes in and out, because clearly you don't want to be sitting there every day standardizing titles and routing through your data once you know how to automate it and what the rules for automation are. So thank you guys for coming. We have some office hours after the webinar that you're welcome to attend. I'll answer any question you want inside of data cleansing and outside. Thank you. So thank you for your time. And remember to join us on our next webinar.